You are now listening to the Horseshoe Huddle with your host Cody Felger and special guest, the Indy Star's own Stephen Holder.
Thank you for joining me on this edition of the Horseshoe Huddle. Today I kind of want to talk about, first off, the Josh McDaniels fiasco, and second off, Frank Reich and kind of what he can bring to the Colts offense. So with me now I have Indy Star reporter Stephen Holder. Stephen, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great.
Good, yeah. I know it's been a crazy couple of weeks, man, so you're probably pretty tired. I get that.
It's been more than a couple, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But, it's been like 6 weeks, but I mean, hey, I'm not digging ditches. I mean, it's not the end of the world, but I would have preferred not to deal with two coaching searches. That would have been nice.
Right. I guess we can just kind of start there then. So Josh McDaniels, he's hired. Colts tweeted out, and then that night, Tuesday night, I mean, it just all went crazy. Can you kind of take me through that process of what you were doing at that time?
Okay, so it's actually a funny story because my daughter had basketball practice that night, and so I was trying to do the good parent thing and take her, and sitting there waiting for them to wrap up, and my phone just goes crazy. It just immediately lights up and just continues blowing up. And I saw the tweet from, I believe it was Adam Schefter originally, and I'm like, it's got to be a fake account because this can't be real. It's like, that doesn't happen. It's got to be a fake account. And I kept looking at it and I'm like, no, it's real. And everybody's retweeting it. And I'm like, this is really happening. I wondered if maybe, if it was true. I wasn't doubting Adam. It was just so unbelievable that, you're constantly trying to explain it away. Like, well, what are the alternatives here? What if it's maybe it's not true? What else could be happening here? You know what I mean? Like, is this bad information? Is this fluid? Is this really done? I don't know. I guess you're having a million conversations inside your head, basically. So then the only thing you can do once you come to terms with it is you start firing off as many phone calls and texts as you can to get some information. And while I was driving home, and my daughter, funny enough, she asked me, so, well, what's going on? She's always frantically making phone calls. And I said, well, honey, the Colts, they had a new coach, but he changed his mind, and he's not going to be their coach anymore. And she looked at me like with this horror, like, wait, they don't have a coach? So she just got done with basketball practice. Her coaches, right? So she's 8. So she's like, so she's like, man, if we don't have a coach, that would be terrible, And so she's like, the Colts don't have a coach. Oh my God. So it was kind of hilarious in retrospect, not at the time. But it was a fun night, to use the term loosely.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the whole, I think you went to Foxborough and you went to, visited players and stuff because, it was all assumed for weeks that McDaniel was going to be the coach. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I would say heading into the week of the AFC Championship game, it had kind of become clear he was going to be the coach. And I wasn't just basing that just on what other people were saying. That was the information I had too. And it was reliable information. It wasn't something where we were making assumptions. I had gotten very reliable information, and I talked to people in the organization. So we felt pretty good about it, and there was nothing to indicate that it was wrong. So obviously there was a lot of interest in Josh McDaniels at that time. So yeah, my editors decided, hey, you know what, let's do this. Why don't you go to Foxborough and see what you can round up. Now, during the AFC Championship week, you're not going to get a lot of time with the offensive coordinator of the Patriots, so that's not happening. So I didn't get a chance to interview Josh, but I spent a couple days in the locker room and was able to really get some sense of what he was about and what he was like to work with as a player from a coaching standpoint. So it was actually pretty beneficial. And then a couple weeks later, I ended up going to Minneapolis for a few days as well for the same purpose, and he was able to talk to us then because at the Super Bowl you're required to do a lot of media obligations. So I spent a lot of time working on Josh McDaniels material, and I probably wrote 10 stories about the guy. I mean, to the point where I was getting a little sick of him.
Yeah.
And so I was particularly bitter when he decided to pull out. Like, dude, I've been writing about you for 3 weeks, and you do this to me? Like, how selfish are you?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I was not happy about it. But yeah, it was a weird scenario. You don't usually. I mean, there are coaching searches every year, right? But you rarely have a situation where, or maybe not as often at least, where the coach that's going to be hired, can't talk about it yet, but everybody knows, and so you're there left to kind of fill this quote unquote dead air for a couple of weeks, as a reporter, when the interest is very strong, right? You can't just like ignore it. You have to address the story,
right?
But you have to kind of do it in a roundabout way. So it was very strange, a very strange set of circumstances. I know that this happened recently with Dan Quinn. I think a couple of years ago, when he was with Seattle and making his move to go to Atlanta. I think they were Seattle was in the Super Bowl that year, and obviously Kyle Shanahan last year, same situation with Atlanta. So, but both those situations worked out. But it is a very odd and awkward dance that you have to do, and this just kind of underscored why.
Yeah, I know that when Chris Ballard's interview, there was a question that was raised, like, were there any concerns, before? Did Josh have any concerns? Did you get that vibe from Josh when you talked to him at the Super Bowl, like he had any concerns? I know he probably couldn't, obviously, talk directly about the job. But, I mean, from what you gathered, I guess I'm curious, were there any indications? 'Cause I know there's some rumors, and there's always going to be rumors spreading about, maybe McDaniels was kind of, standoffish a little bit about the Colts offer before he actually officially, withdrew his name.
Yeah, it's a good question. I've gotten that question a few times, and what I would say is I really saw no indication of that. I remember at the opening night, so Monday night before the Super Bowl, they have what used to be media day, and they have this sort of opening night primetime deal now. And I spent, I would say, about 40 minutes with him, at least half an hour with him that night. Myself and others, Bob Kravitz among them, and some others from Indianapolis, and we all were. I mean, I've got a huge name tag hanging from my neck. I've got 3 Indianapolis TV stations there. Same thing with their lanyards on. He knows exactly who he's talking to, right? There's no equivocation from us for sure. Even though we are kind of hedging our questions because we understand he's not going to talk directly about the Colts. But I think everyone understood what the deal was, right? I mean, there was no misunderstanding. And he sat there and talked at length about being a head coach, about how he would establish his culture, all the different things he would do. And I really didn't sense from him any reluctance to talk about it. I didn't sense any sort of wavering. I didn't see any of that. Now, obviously, we weren't having as direct a conversation about the Colts as I would have liked. But again, I don't think there was any misunderstanding. He knew exactly why we were there. He knew what we were talking about. And he played along. He completely played along. And this played out a couple more times over the course of the week because they're required to talk several times. And I believe a couple days later on Wednesday, same scenario. Thursday, same scenario. Wow. So there really, in my view, was no reason to sense that anything was wrong. I mean, we even had a big chuckle about it because one of the first questions we asked was, "Hey, let's forget about the Super Bowl. What are you doing after the Super Bowl?" And he kind of laughed. Said, I don't know. Not sure. I haven't made any plans. He was being obviously facetious with us, and he gave this like devilish grin, and we all kind of got a laugh out of it. I mean, he knew what was going on, and it makes it all the more amazing that he did what he did because. I looked into the guy's eyes repeatedly and got the sense that he was full go and ready to do this and had clearly given it a lot of thought. So I was as surprised as anyone.
Yeah, so I'm curious because I've heard so many different views. You can never know what's reliable nowadays. So I want to get a reliable source from you, Mr. Holder. I guess I'm curious what in the world happened, in that Tuesday afternoon, Tuesday evening. What happened? Like, what changed Josh's decision?
Well, I'll start by by saying this: the stuff that came out, I guess, the night of the Super Bowl, there were those rumors. Pro Football Talk and Mike Florio. I don't doubt that people were saying that to Mike Florio. Like I know Mike Florio. I've known him for a long time, and I don't doubt that people were telling him that. However, I still don't think that's necessarily the genesis of all of this. In other words, what I'm saying is, I'm telling you, the Colts were completely blindsided by this, and if those doubts were really out there to the point that a reporter was hearing them, it's very hard to believe that the Colts had no indication of it, right? I mean,
right.
They're not idiots. They have been in contact with Josh McDaniels the whole time. So, I mean, who's better positioned to know that he might have been wavering than the people who are talking to him every day? I mean, it just doesn't make sense. So it was just weird to me. I guess what I'm saying is I don't see a lot of connection to whatever people were talking about Sunday night before the announcement to what happened on Tuesday. Because to your question, what happened, I mean, look, the Colts, they didn't want an explanation, and they really didn't care. But I do believe the reports from New England that essentially Josh McDaniels had not gotten, I guess Belichick and Bob Kraft had not shown him the kind of love they expressed on that Tuesday morning. He had not gotten that since the end of the season. Whether that was intentional on Belichick's part, I don't know. I mean, the guy is different, right? I mean, he doesn't. I think he always wants you to think you need him as opposed to the other way around. And the fact of the matter here is, I think he needs Josh McDaniels, and he finally was honest about that. Now, I really believe that Josh McDaniels is a huge asset to Bill Belichick, and maybe he was overdue in telling him that and expressing that and making that clear to him. And when he finally did that, it was like the guy who really didn't want to break up with his girlfriend, and he just kind of caved. And I think that's a very plausible story. I believe it, and it's the only version that really, I think, makes sense here because, again, the Colts had no indication, no reason to think there was any issue, and that's why I believe whatever happens that Tuesday afternoon in Foxborough.
That's interesting. Yeah, it's kind of just crazy circumstances, Stephen. Definitely. So I kind of want to go into the new head coach of the Colts, Frank Reich. You were at that presser on Tuesday, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. I guess I'm curious, what were your takeaways? Like, I know Frank had a lot of good points. I loved his underdog, talk when asked about McDaniels from Pat McAfee. That was pretty great. I guess I'm curious, what were your biggest takeaways from his press conference?
Well, for me, it was just his demeanor. He's not a guy who was coming out there and trying to win you over. Now, he did, quote-unquote, win the press conference, right, like we like to say. He did that. But he didn't do that because he came out there with a bunch of fancy lines and a bunch of cliches. No disrespect to Chuck Pagano. I'm just saying that generally. And he really made no effort to do that. He was just like, hey, this is who I am. This is what I'm about. I don't really care what you think, but this is what I am. But he does it in a way where he doesn't do it like kind of a badass. He does it like kind of, hey, just as a nice guy. He's just, a nice central Pennsylvania guy, right? Former minister. But at the same time, there's kind of this cutthroat element to it. Like, we're going to go out there and we're going to punch people in the mouth and be more physical than any other team in the league. Now, that may turn out to be completely false. Okay? It's all talk until you do it. But he didn't come out there and try to sell you with fancy lines. And the one thing that struck me is I could see him taking the same approach with his team. Like, I was an underdog. I was a guy who stuck around the NFL for 13 or 14 years, and in many of those cases being a backup guy, but he got everything he could out of his career. And he did it because there's no BS about him. He's just a worker. And that will appeal to players, I really believe, because they've heard every speech in the book, okay? They've heard it from their high school coach, they've heard it from their college coach, and they've heard it from their coaches in the NFL. They've heard every stupid line, every stupid speech you can imagine. And some work and some don't. But Frank Reich is not about speeches. He's just a guy who's going to tell you, this is what we're going to do, this is what you're going to do, and if you don't do it, then we'll get somebody else to do it. And that's pretty much it, right? There's really no equivocation there, right? He doesn't complicate this. So I like that about him, and I think that's going to help him succeed.
Yeah, absolutely. So I kind of want to go going off of that a little bit. So Reich talked about how he'll be calling the plays for the Colts offense. I'm curious, what do you think that offense will look like in 2018 and under Reich's tenure?
So your timing is good here because I'm writing a story right now about this, and I didn't know where to start, okay? Because I'm sitting here, I thought, okay, this will be a good story, and then I sat down and write it, and I'm like, okay, I don't know what the heck I'm supposed to say. So, so I had to get some direction on this, and because he's never run his own offense, that's the problem.
Right.
So we don't know who he is, we don't know what he is, but what I've been told is that it won't be exactly the same, but you really should focus on the Eagles' offense. That's the direction they're going, and this is what people with the Colts told me. They're going sort of that direction, and one feature that you will see a lot is a lot of these RPOs that people are talking about. And I went back and I watched the Eagles, the run-pass option. And I went back and I watched the Eagles, and I never sort of passed myself off as some kind of, X and O expert. I really don't. But I think, but I listen to people, and I talk to the subjects, who are in the locker room and so forth. So I get some information, and then I couple that with what I see. So hearing that they were going to kind of emulate the Eagles to an extent, I went back and I watched a little bit of Eagles this morning. In fact, that's what I was doing, and wow, I really see everything that Frank Reich outlined in his press conference. It was only one little section of his press conference, but everything he outlined, I saw it in that one little section of game film that I watched. I watched literally the first series that I watched, and I picked a random game purposely. I didn't go and look at the Super Bowl film or anything. I picked one random game. It was like week 8, I think, against the 49ers. And in that first series alone, he talked about a couple things. He talked about using multiple personnel groups. He talked about being up-tempo, and he talked about things like, being an aggressive offense, right? And I saw all of that right off the bat. There was a series in this game that Carson Wentz was playing at this time, and in their first series of the game, they come out 1st and 10 at whatever yard line they're at, and they go shotgun. Okay, it's 3 wide. They go shotgun, and they hand the ball to LeGarrette Blount. He gets like 3 yards, nothing serious. 2nd down, no huddle. Okay, check. He said that, right? Then they go 3 wide, but they do it differently. They go like twins on one side, another receiver to the other side. And on 1st down, they went trips to the right, shotgun with single back and handed it to Blount. So they're just right there. You see 3 different things that he talked about on the first 2 plays of the game. You see multiple personnel groups. You see up tempo, no huddle. You see just all these different things, right? I mean, I was like, man, this is exactly what he was talking about, and that continued throughout that whole series. And I just made like a huge checklist of things that I saw. I was like, well, this wasn't really that hard. Okay, so he really said it in the press conference, and then I watched the tape and was like, okay, well, there it is. So the answer to your question is they're going to look a lot like the Eagles, but he's going to put his own spin on it, and that I can't account for, right? I mean, I can't predict what those things are going to be, right. But I think definitely look to the Eagles and what they've done, and that is something Chris Ballard really is seeking too. One thing that I learned was that Chris Ballard thinks that these college elements that we're starting to see in pro football, he thinks that's going to continue to expand and grow in terms of its use. So you might as well start doing it. And I like that thinking, be ahead of the curve and not behind it. So I think it's going to be really fun to watch. They're really going to be shotgun-based. They're going to push the ball when necessary, but these RPOs give you a lot of quicker throws too, which is never a bad thing when your quarterback's taking a lot of hits. So a lot of interesting stuff to come. All I can say is just be ready for anything. It's going to be, I think, really interesting.
Yeah. Last question here, Steven. Nick Sirianni, what can you tell me about this guy, the new Colts offensive coordinator?
Not a lot, unfortunately, but what I will say is that I heard from someone Okay, I checked in with a colleague in the media who covered the Chargers for some of his time in I was going to say San Diego and LA, and what I was told, literally, these were this guy's words. You know, a guy who's been around the Chargers a long time. He said Nick Sirianni is going to be a star, and I was like, what? I mean, apparently this guy is so impressive.
Wow.
I've never met him, and I hope to do that during the combine or at some point in the near future. But this guy I trust, you know, as a longtime observer of the Chargers, that guy is going to be a star. And I've seen and heard other comments like that from people who know him. I've seen a couple people even say he's got the head coach profile. So the guy just has to be really impressive. Again, I've never met him. I don't know much about him, but I'm really interested to learn more. And one thing I'd say is that, you know, he's been a guy who apparently has had a lot of success with quarterbacks too. So he brings another guy into the fold along with Reich, who has a lot of, you know, sort of proven results with quarterbacks.
Sure.
And I think, you know, the goal here is, obviously one of the goals I should say, is really to maximize Andrew Luck. So that's never going to hurt. And I just think they're putting a lot of quarterback expertise around Andrew Luck, because that is one of the biggest benefits you get with Frank Reich is he's a quarterback guy, right? I mean, Peyton Manning will tell you that. So I believe it. And so they're putting, like I said, a lot of quarterback expertise and knowledge around Andrew Luck, which is not to say Andrew Luck, you know, is struggling and needs, you know, better coaching. All I'm saying is it could make him better, is what I'm saying. So they get the guy healthy, and that's a whole other story. You know, I think he's getting there. But if they get him healthy, Andrew Luck's going to be, from everything I can tell, he's going to be in really good hands, and that's exciting if you like the Colts.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Stephen, for your time. That's Stephen Holder of the Indy Star. As always, thank you, Stephen. Appreciate it.
All right, anytime. I appreciate it.
Take care, man. Again, that was Stephen Holder from the Indy Star joining us, and it'll be interesting to kind of see how Andrew Luck progresses. And definitely, if Andrew Luck can come back 100% healthy, like Stephen said, man, the sky's the limit. So thank you guys for joining us. As always, you can find me on Twitter at Cody Felger 55. Thank you guys, and I appreciate your time.
You can also follow Stephen Holder on Twitter at HolderSteven. Thank you for listening.